Mr Shakespeare did not come to London until probably 1592. That was when he first arrived. And it is inconceivable to me that somebody coming from Stratford, who would have had a Warwickshire accent, who would have had no way of having learnt Italian or Hebrew, would have had no way of developing intense musical skills, because none of his relatives were musicians, and none of his community, as far as we know, were professional musicians. There's no way that within like 12 months he could suddenly drop his Warwickshire accent, start writing standard English that was intensely musical, making lots of Hebrew and Italian puns, and referring to hundreds of literary works which he probably have had no reason to read in Stratford. So there is just no social context that makes any sense. In 1622, the quarto of Othello was published, which has 163 lines missing from it, which were then added in between 1622 and 1623, when the first folio is created. And these 163 lines expand the part of the character Amelia, and they also create the Willow song, and Amelia is asked to repeat the Willow song. What doth thy song-bowed lady, Willow? I will die to music, Willow, 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 Willow. Now, this combination of an Amelia and a Willow, 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 dying like a swan to music, is part of a broader pattern that exists right across all the Shakespearean plays, which I call the swan signatures. And in order to understand them, you need to know that the dying swan to music, which comes from Ovid, is the standard image of the Renaissance poet, the great poet. And there are two other places where it appears. Firstly, in King John, where the person who's saying it is Henry, who is John's son. And the other place it appears is in Merchant of Venice, where the person it's referring to is Bassanio, who is going to die like a swan in Portia's tears. And this is no coincidence, because these names, Amelia, Johnson, Willow, Bassanio, are the names of England's first published woman writer, Amelia Johnson Willoughby Bassanio. She's written her own names into the plays and associated them with the standard Renaissance image for the great poet, as a way of showing us very clearly that she wrote them so that she would eventually be known for what she had done. There's just too many coincidences here. Her family knew Johnson. The publisher was one of her Willoughby cousins, and she was alive and able to make those changes, which Mr. William Shakespeare was not able to do, because he was dead. The Shakespearean plays are the most musical plays in the world. They have altogether nearly 2,000 musical references all throughout, and there are several very large collections of all these terms, which have been turned into special dictionaries of Shakespearean music. In addition, they use about 100 songs, of which the most popular, which is used 4 times, is King Cophetua and the Beggar Maid. Now, this is an unusual song to have as the most popular Shakespearean song, you would think, because it's about a black king of Africa who picks up a young black beggar maid and falls in love with her and marries her. And you can imagine why this might be of interest to a young black woman living with the son of Henry VIII. It's hard to imagine, a better biographical fit for being interested in that song. So these are the most musical plays in the world. Taming of the Shrew, for instance, has 110 different musical references in it, which is about one every minute. And these plays are, in fact, 300% more musical than any plays by any other writer in England. because the average play by Marlowe or Lodge or Green has only 18 references in a play, which compares to like Twelfth Night, which has 91 or 110 in the Shrew. But what is really even more interesting is that the music for several of these plays was composed by Robert Johnson, who was Amelia's maternal cousin. He was a lutist and the son of another royal lutist who was the brother of her mother. So her maternal cousin Robert Johnson wrote Where the Bee Sucks, There Suck I, wrote The Tempest, Full Fathom 5, Thy Father Lieth, and altogether wrote about half a dozen of these songs and dance music for the plays. And of course, because this was Elizabethan London, playwrights would give the work to members of their family and the people that they knew and trusted, and that must be why Robert Johnson ended up being the most popular composer for any of the Shakespearean plays. It's always been a problem trying to understand how the author could have had this very strong feminist slant in Tudor England, because there were very few women who were highly educated. Certainly Mr Shakespeare's daughters were both illiterate, and they were not educated, and the portrait of the women as being associated with music, playing music and reading Ovid and speaking foreign languages. This is a portrait of a very select number of women in the country, probably as small as 30 or 40 women in the country would have really matched this sort of profile. And it just happened that one of them was Anne Locke, who was the inventor of the sonnet sequence, who was the daughter of the people who lived next door to Amelia when she was growing up, and a friend of Susan Bertie's, who was her stepmother. So she was one of the top 4 most educated women in the country, and so Amelia had access to her right from the start of her life, on while living with the Willoughbys. And then in the household where she was living with the Willoughbys, Catherine, Duchess of Suffolk, was an early Tudor feminist who was the woman who persuaded Henry VIII to allow women to read the Bible for themselves rather than have it read to them by priests, and says so in the her entry in the Dictionary of National Biography. It's well known. So she was very concerned about women being able to read, particularly reading the Bible. She makes sure that her daughter Susan Bertie was educated by Miles Coverdale, one of the translators of the Bible. So Amelia was growing up in a situation where it was expected that women would be highly educated, and she was also growing up at court, where one of the books that were used to train young girls in etiquette at court was the Knight de la Tour Landry's book for his 4 daughters, which had been written really as a guide of etiquette by Landry for his daughters, and was used to teach young girls how to behave at court. And this is used in the Shrew play in several places, and it's really been quite inexplicable why the plays should use a training manual for young girls at court. How on earth would anybody get to know it? Secondly, the Shakespearean plays also use the work of de Pizan, who was a woman lawyer, who was a feminist who believed that women should be able to speak out for themselves and learn law. And her work is used in several places. It's used in Midsummer Night's Dream. It's used in some of the Henry plays, and it's used even in As You Like It, where one of her descriptions of the wind is used. And she's also using aspects of another major woman writer, Queen Margaret of Navarre, who was an early woman playwright of the 1530s. So for some reason, the author of the Shakespearean plays has gone out of their way to make use of women playwrights.